Man, I hate water. It has no taste to it at all. The polling has shifted huge in favor of
Orange man bad. Orange man bad.
I know. I told you all. Don't pay attention to the polling. Don't worry about the polls. The polls are fake. Don't believe them. They're never right. But what I also said in that video I made about polling and about Trump's chances is that you need to pay very close attention to trends. So when you see a poll that has Trump down by 6 points, don't automatically believe he's going to lose by 6 points. But if you see a poll that Trump is down 6 points, and 3 weeks ago or a month ago he was down by 12 points, that's when you need to pay attention to the polls. So the time has come to pay attention to the polls because we're seeing huge shifts. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will quickly refer you to the Real Clear Politics polls. They do an average, a rolling average. Excuse me. So the Emerson poll, remember, these are national polls. So I'm sort of going against my advice here when I always say state polls, state polls, state polls. And there is one man, by the way, who, orange man fell over. But he got back up. That's what we're talking about right now. There is one man who has been paying attention to the state polls, and we will get to him a little bit later on. But let's take a look at the polls as they stand right now. These are national polls. Remember, national polls. Emerson right now has Biden up to 49-47. The Hill has Biden up a little bit more by 9, 47-38. The Economist, 50-41. Rasmussen, 46-45, dead heat. So, and then CNN, 50-46. If CNN has the race at 50-46, you know this race is actually 50-50, right? You know this race is tight. You know this is going to be a very close election. So, the trends have now gone in favor of the president. The betting odds. Talk about trends. I'm looking at it right here on July 7th. It was 56.3 for Biden, 39.3 for Trump. And the last one they took was 52.1 for Biden and 48.4 for Trump. So clearly the race is tightening. Clearly there is a trend here. Clearly this is a trend that we should pay attention to. You're probably wondering why is the trend happening. That's why I'm here to tell you why it's happening. I wanted to come up with 3 R's, but I only had 2. I was going to do 3. I was going to do riots, RNC, and the recluse, but I thought that was a little mean. Okay, that's a little too mean. The recluse being Joe Biden. But that's a little too much. I don't like to be too harsh on this channel unless it's really called for, which it is called for when we're talking about the media, which we will talk about in a second. Why have the polls shifted? Riots. That's the number one reason why. The number 2 reason why is the RNC. The RNC went very well. I dedicated my last episode to all this. The RNC, optically, content, everything was flawless. It was a tough week last week for the left-wing movement, for the DNC, for Joe Biden, for George Soros, for the globalists. Giving you a little bit of Alex Jones. But the riots are the real reason, the number 1 reason why the polls have shifted so much. The riots are the number 1 reason. When Americans see chaos in the streets night after night after night after night, they begin to connect the dots about what's going on here. And if you doubt that they are starting to connect the dots, even Don Lemon the other night said these riots have to stop because it's showing up in the polling. I couldn't believe how honest he was. It's showing up in the polling. Oh, you don't say. Hundreds, if not thousands of people torching businesses, looting businesses, complete and utter destruction, lawlessness, and degeneracy night after night after night. And did you somehow think that was going to benefit the Democrats, who have seemed to be in favor of all this stuff, and the media, who seem to be in favor of all this stuff? Let me tell you what's going on with the media, okay? The media does not care about what happens in the African American community. They don't care. What they do care about is getting rid of Trump. How do you get rid of Trump? Well, maybe you could use the protests and the civil unrest to make it look like he's a bad president, or make him look bad, which they were doing in June and July. But at some point, they started to think, maybe we aren't scoring points. Maybe they're more own goals. Sorry, we're going to have to move Orange Man Bad over here. So they figured out that maybe we're not scoring as many points now, and there are probably a few more own goals going on than points. So they started by not covering the riots. They started by just ignoring them. We're not even going to say anything about them anymore. You won't even know they're happening. But there is a problem, and that is that a lot of people get their news online now. A lot of people get their news from Twitter and Facebook and numerous other places online. My show. And those places are covering the riots. Andy No is covering the riots. He's posting videos every 10 minutes, every night before I go to bed. Oh, let's see what's happening in Minneapolis tonight. Oh, there's a building on fire. Which, by the way, you have to go watch. Sorry, my voice cracked there. You have to go watch. Do you remember? I'm not sure if I spoke about this in a previous show, but there was a clip of Ali Velshi on MSNBC. This is going way back to when the riots all started, saying on air, live, it doesn't seem to be too unruly here, as you look behind him and the entire city is burning to a crisp. Well, believe it or not, this has happened again. This time it was a CNN reporter who is reporting live, and I can't remember the exact words he used, but basically he was trying to say, nothing to see here, nothing, just some peaceful protesters, just some people who want to have their voice heard, just some people who have been held down by the Republicans for years and years, and they're just trying to say what they have to say. Meanwhile, behind him, the entire block is on fire. It's on fire. Yeah, maybe you should take a look behind you, pal. I don't think everything is going quite as peacefully as you're making it out to be. So the media was using Black Lives Matter for their own purposes, for their own political purposes, but now they're kicking them to the road. We don't need you anymore. You're getting a little bit too unruly. Stop misbehaving, Black Lives Matter. You're ruining it for everyone. You're ruining Biden's chances. You have to stop protesting. You have to stop rioting. Behave. That's what's coming out of the media right now. This man who has been paying attention to the state-by-state polling, he happens to be the same guy who warned the Democrats last time. And you're thinking, oh, come on, you're going to talk about some right-winger who said Trump was going to win. No, this is Michael Moore. Michael Moore, remember him? Remember Michael Moore? Michael Moore posted on his Facebook over the weekend, and he starts, sorry to have to provide the reality check again, but when CNN polled registered voters in August in just the swing states, Biden and Trump were in a virtual tie. In Minnesota, it's 47-47. By the way, if you look at my original Electoral College prediction, I was very bullish on Minnesota, and I still am. Trump has closed the gap by 4 points. Are you ready for a Trump victory? Are you mentally prepared to be outsmarted by Trump again? Do you find comfort in your certainty that there is no way Trump can win? Are you content with the trust you place in the DNC to pull this off? The Biden campaign just announced he'll be visiting a number of states, but not Michigan. Sound familiar? I'm warning you almost 10 weeks in advance, the enthusiasm level for the 60 million in Trump's base is off the charts, and he has off the charts capitalized for effect. For Joe, not so much. Not so much. We'll say it like Trump, not so much. Don't leave it to the Democrats to get rid of Trump. You have to get rid of Trump. And then he goes into, we have to get out the vote. There was a poll on Twitter which showed Trump winning the African-American vote. Sorry, not winning the African-American vote. He had 20% of the African-American vote, which if he got would in a sense, be winning it because that is an extremely high number for him. 2 polls showing him at 20%. There was another figure in that same post, in that same poll, which showed that there were more, that Biden's support among Democrats was lower than Trump's support among Republicans, which means Trump has shored up his base and Biden has not. And someone commented, I find it very hard to believe that Biden is not getting the same amount of support from his party that Trump is. I find that very hard to believe. Why do you find that hard to believe? Look at Michael Moore's post. There are many in the Democrat Party who did not want Joe Biden, okay? I remember watching Michael Moore on the Circus television program. He was basically saying, look, Biden, this is back in the primaries, Biden is John Kerry. Biden is Mitt Romney. Biden is Al Gore. Biden is Bob Dole. What do all these people have in common here? What they all have in common is they're not excitable. No one is excited to vote for them. If you look back election after election after election, it is always the candidate with the most enthusiasm and the most base support who wins. And that includes George W. Bush. Remember they conjured up all this stuff? Karl Rove masterfully on the same-sex marriage stuff to get all the evangelicals out. It was a base election. Every election is a base election. Every election is a base election. There were many Democrats who supported Trump who would have voted for Bernie had Bernie been the nominee. They have gone and done it again. The Democrats have nominated a career politician who's seen as an acceptable candidate, a moderate candidate, and being on the right, as I am, I remember when the Republican Party told us, in order to beat Obama, you have to nominate an acceptable candidate. You have to nominate a moderate candidate. You have to moderate someone who doesn't offend anybody. You have to find someone who doesn't make people mad, who's just nice and easy. He gets along with the other side. Moderate guy, governed in Massachusetts. How did that work out for you, Mitt Romney? How did that work out for your Republican Party? Remember? I remember that very well. Now, I understand a lot of people who watch this probably aren't fans of Michael Moore, but maybe you should take what he's saying to heart. He's worried. And I saw Bill Maher said himself, he's worried too. Why are they worried? Because these people understand, Maher, Moore, they understand that elections are won by your base. They're won by enthusiasm. Remember, I wrote this down to make sure I remember to include this. Hillary Clinton actually did better in some of the suburban areas. In the Philadelphia suburbs, I believe she did better than Obama. Her levels of support were fine there. It wasn't that she didn't get out the vote in these areas so much as Trump really got out the vote. If you look in the rural areas and exurban areas, Trump dominated. He absolutely ran up the score in these areas so much. He got his base out so enthusiastically that night that it overpowered anything else that the other side did. That's the way you win an election. That's the way you do it. When you see that Trump's polling at, his approval ratings at 46, 47%, that's enough. That's enough. That's all he needs. That's all he needs. As long as those people turn out, he will win. You can pay attention to the polls only when they're showing a trend. The trend is clear right now. The trend is toward Trump. This could change. Anything can happen. There's still a couple months to go, and I'll be here the whole way along. But when you're looking at polls, remember, look at the state by state like Michael Moore did. He's talking about Minnesota, and he's talking about Michigan. That's where this election is going to be won. Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida. So, and when you look at the national numbers, you can kind of ignore the national numbers, but don't ignore them when a huge gap is being closed either way. But right now, it's tending to go in Trump's direction. Why? Riots in the RNC. The riots are starting to have an effect. The media stopped covering the riots. They don't want you to see it. But guess what? They don't control us anymore. They don't control the narrative anymore. And because they don't control the narrative, that is the very reason why this man is your president and might get reelected.